The night Claire Bennett showed up at my door, 1 year to the day since we buried her husband, I already knew the secret I'd been carrying was about to cost me everything. My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 36, I run a small construction outfit outside Bozeman, and for 12 months I had done everything a man can do to avoid one specific woman without ever admitting to himself that's what he was doing. I took jobs 2 counties over. I stopped going to the diner on 5th where she used to bring Marcus lunch. I told myself I was giving her space to grieve. That was true. It just wasn't the whole truth. Marcus Bennett had been my best friend since we were 14 years old, since the summer his family moved in next door and he showed up at my fence line holding a busted bike chain like it was an invitation. We built our first deck together at 19, badly. We started the company together at 26, less badly. He was the one who talked to clients, who remembered birthdays, who could make a bank loan officer laugh before the numbers even came up. I was the one who could tell you if a beam would hold before the math proved it. Together we were something whole. Alone we were both half a business. Then, 13 months ago, his truck went off Route 9 in an ice storm on a Tuesday night, and half of everything I understood about my life went with it. I hadn't slept right since. Not because of nightmares. Because of the quiet. A friendship like that leaves a specific shape of silence behind, and you feel it every single day in the moments you would have called him. A tricky client. A good joke. A bad game score. My hand would move for the phone, and then I'd remember, and the remembering never got any easier no matter how many times I did it. That Tuesday night, exactly a year later, I was sitting on my porch with a beer I wasn't really drinking, listening to the same kind of wind that had probably been blowing the night his truck lost the road. Headlights swung into my driveway. I didn't recognize the car at first. Then I saw her get out, and my chest did something it had no business doing. Claire walked up my steps slower than I remembered her walking anywhere. She'd always moved like a woman with 4 things to do at once. Tonight she moved like a woman who'd been carrying something heavy for so long her body had started to believe it was permanent. "Ethan," she said. Just my name. Like she'd practiced saying it and still hadn't gotten used to how it sounded out loud. "Claire." I stood up too fast, nearly knocked the beer over. "You okay? Is it the kids?" "They're at my sister's." She wrapped her arms around herself even though it wasn't that cold. "I need to talk to you. Tonight. If I wait until tomorrow, I don't think I'll do it." That sentence should have worried me less than it did. Instead, something cold moved straight through the middle of me because I knew, the way you know weather is turning before the sky actually changes, that whatever she'd driven over here to say, it had something to do with the thing I'd spent a year hoping she'd never find out. I held the door open. "Come in." She sat on my couch like she wasn't sure she was allowed to. I got her water because I didn't know what else to offer a grieving widow at 9 o'clock at night. She held the glass in both hands and didn't drink from it. "I found something," she said, going through the office files. The accountant needed old statements for the audit, and I found something Marcus never told me about. My stomach dropped somewhere near my boots. "Claire." "Don't," she said, quiet but firm. "Let me finish. I've been driving around for 2 hours trying to figure out how to say this, so just let me finish." I nodded. I felt like a man standing at the edge of a hole he'd dug himself, watching someone else finally look down into it. "There's a transfer," she said. "From the business account. $40,000, 3 years ago. No invoice. No explanation. Just a wire, dated the week your divorce finalized, made out to you." The room went very quiet. I want to tell you I had some smooth answer ready. I didn't. I'd spent 3 years hoping this exact conversation would never happen, and now that it was happening, all I had was the truth, which felt too small and too big at the same time. "It was a loan," I said finally. "From the business?" "Without telling me." "From Marcus." My voice came out rougher than I wanted. "Not from the business, not really. He moved it through the business account because that's the only place that kind of money existed. But it wasn't company funds, Claire. It was ours. His and mine. Half of everything in that company was mine on paper, and he used my half to help me when I needed it and never told either one of us the whole truth about how he did it." She stared at me. "Why?" "Because I was drowning," I said. "The divorce ate everything. Legal fees, the settlement, the house I had to walk away from. I was 2 months from losing my equipment, Claire. 2 months from losing everything I'd built with him. And I never asked him for a dime. He just showed up one day with a number and said, "Don't argue with me, pay me back whenever, and don't you dare tell Claire because she'll worry about money we don't have to worry about." "We did have to worry about it," she said, and for the first time her voice cracked. "Ethan, we almost lost the house last spring. I thought it was because business had been slow. I never once thought it was because $40,000 of our savings was sitting in your bank account." That hit harder than anything Grant or Lauren or anyone in those other stories could have said, because it was true, and because I had let it stay hidden for 3 years out of something that used to feel like loyalty and now felt a whole lot more like cowardice. "I paid back 12,000 of it," I said. "Slow, whenever I could, cash mostly, so it wouldn't show up clean on the books. I still owe him 28. "You still owe him." Her laugh had no humor in it at all. "Ethan, he's been gone 13 months. You don't owe him anything anymore. You owe me." And you didn't say a word. I set my beer down because my hand had started to shake and I didn't want her to see it. "I know. Do you?" She stood up, paced to the window, came back. "Because I have spent a year trying to keep that company standing on numbers that don't add up, wondering what I did wrong, wondering if Marcus was hiding something worse, an affair, a gambling problem, something. Do you understand what it's like to grieve a man and doubt him at the same time?" I did understand it, actually. Better than she knew. Because for 13 months I'd been grieving Marcus and hating myself in equal measure, and neither feeling had ever let up enough to let the other one breathe. "He wasn't hiding anything from you that would have hurt you," I said. "Except this. And that's on me as much as him. Maybe more, because I let him talk me into staying quiet, and I've had a year to fix it and I didn't." "Why not?" That was the real question. The one under the question she'd actually asked. I looked at her for a long second. Grief does something to a person's eyes. It hollows them out and then, slowly, fills them back in with something steadier. Claire's eyes had that steadier look now, underneath the hurt. It made her harder to lie to, even by omission. "Because the second I told you," I said, "I'd have to explain why he did it." And explaining why meant admitting how close I came to losing everything, and how much of what I've rebuilt since the divorce exists because your husband quietly handed me a piece of his own life without asking for credit. And some selfish part of me didn't want you looking at me and only seeing a debt. I stopped. That sentence had been headed somewhere I wasn't ready to go, not that night, not with her husband barely a year in the ground. "You wanted what?" she asked. "Nothing," I said. "It doesn't matter right now." She studied me. She'd always been sharper than people gave her credit for, sharper than Marcus himself sometimes, and I watched her decide not to push, at least not yet, filing the unfinished sentence away somewhere she could come back to it later. "I need the truth from now on," she said instead. "Every bit of it. No more protecting me from things that were already my business to know." "Okay," I said. "I mean it, Ethan. If we're going to fix this company, you don't get to decide what I can handle." "Okay," I said again, and this time I meant it the way you mean a vow. She left a little after 11, and I stood on my porch a long time after her taillights disappeared down the road, feeling like a man who'd survived a storm that was actually just the first band of a much bigger one. The company meeting happened 4 days later, and it went about as well as you'd expect a meeting to go when a widow discovers her dead husband's business partner has been sitting on a debt bigger than the company's cash reserves. Marcus's sister, Renee, came too. She'd never liked me much, not out of any real reason, just the ordinary suspicion some people carry toward their sibling's closest friend, the sense that the friend got a version of their brother that the family didn't. When Claire told her about the $40,000, Renee's mouth went tight in a way that told me exactly how this meeting was going to go before anyone said a word. We sat in the little conference room above the hardware store that Marcus and I had built the company inside of, the same room where he used to keep a jar of butterscotch candies on the shelf that nobody had thrown away yet. "So let me understand this," Renee said, arms crossed. "My brother gave you $40,000 of company money, told nobody, and you let his widow find out by accident during an audit." "That's not far off," I said. There wasn't a version of that sentence that made me look better, so I didn't try to build one. And you didn't think, at any point in the last year, that maybe you owed her the truth? I thought about it every single day, I said. That doesn't make what I did right. I'm not asking anybody in this room to think it does. Claire spoke before Renee could. Renee, I appreciate you being here, but this is between me and Ethan. I already had this conversation with him. And you're just fine with it? No, Claire said. I'm not fine with it. I'm furious about it. But I've decided being furious and deciding what happens next aren't the same job, and I'd rather focus on the second one. Renee looked at her like she wanted to argue and couldn't quite find the ground to stand on. I recognized the look. It was the same look people got around Marcus when he'd already thought 3 steps ahead of wherever the conversation was trying to go. What do you want from him? Renee finally asked her. Claire turned to me. I want the rest of the money back. On a real schedule, in writing, nothing under the table this time. Done, I said. I'll have Callahan draw it up by Friday. And I want you at every financial meeting from here on, not just the ones you feel like showing up to. Done. And, she said, and here her voice wavered just slightly, I want to know what he was thinking. Why you? Why not tell me? I need to hear it from you, not guess at it for the rest of my life. The room got quiet. Renee's arms stayed crossed, but she'd stopped looking like she wanted to throw me out a window, which for Renee was practically an embrace. Because your husband, I said slowly, spent his whole life being the guy who could talk anybody into anything, and the one thing he could never talk himself into was letting a friend go down without trying to catch him. I was going down, Claire. Quietly, the way men do it, no drama, just slowly running out of runway. He caught me. He didn't do the math on whether it was smart. He just did it, the way he did everything, and then he asked me to keep it quiet because he didn't want you carrying weight that wasn't yours to carry. It became mine to carry anyway, she said softly. That's the part he got wrong. I know, I said. That's the part one got wrong too, keeping it going after he was gone. I told myself I was protecting his memory. Really, I was just protecting myself from a conversation I didn't want to have. Renee looked between us for a long moment, then picked up her purse. I'll leave you two to finish the schedule. At the door she paused, looked back at me, and said, in a voice that had lost most of its edge, he talked about you a lot at the end, you know. Not about money. Just about you being steady. He'd have wanted you looking after her. He just should have told her that himself instead of leaving it to a bank transfer. She left. Claire and I sat there a while in the quiet that Marcus's jar of butterscotch candies seemed to be presiding over, and neither of us said anything for a long time. I meant what I said, she told me eventually. About the truth going forward. I know. So tell me the rest of it. The part you stopped yourself from saying on my couch. I looked at her. A year of avoiding this exact moment collapsed down into about 4 seconds of silence. Not yet, I said. Not while the ground's still this uneven. You deserve better than a confession that gets tangled up with grief and guilt and a debt schedule. When I tell you, I want you to be able to hear it clean, without wondering if it's just leftover loyalty talking. She studied me a long moment, and something in her face told me she already had a good guess what I meant. She didn't push. She just nodded, slow, and said, I can wait for clean. Word got around fast, the way it always does in a town small enough that the hardware store doubles as a courthouse for gossip. By the following week, a man named Dale Pruitt had heard enough of the story to smell an opportunity, and Dale Pruitt had never in his life let an opportunity walk past without trying to buy it. Dale ran a bigger outfit out of the county seat, the kind of company that bid on strip malls and self-storage complexes instead of decks and additions, and he'd wanted Marcus and Ethan Construction folded into his business for years. Marcus used to call him the vulture in a golf shirt, and he wasn't wrong. Dale showed up at the office on a Thursday morning wearing a polo the color of a highway sign and a smile built for closing deals, not making friends. Claire, he said, not bothering to look at me first. Heard you're going through a rough patch. Cash flow trouble. Audits. That sort of thing gets around. We're managing it, Claire said. I'm sure you are. Dale set a folder on her desk like he was doing her a favor just by touching it. I'd hate to see 15 years of Marcus's work get dragged down by a debt that isn't even yours. I can offer a fair number for the company. Take the weight off. You could focus on the kids instead of chasing invoices. The debt's half paid, I said. And the company isn't for sale. Dale finally looked at me, the way a man looks at something he's already decided doesn't matter. Didn't realize you were still speaking for her. I'm not speaking for her, I said. I'm speaking as her partner in the business her husband built. There's a difference, and you know it. Claire didn't need me to fight that battle for her, and she made that clear about 2 seconds later. Mr. Pruitt, she said, sliding the folder back across the desk without opening it, my husband spent 15 years building something you've spent 15 years wanting. The fact that we hit a hard year doesn't make it yours to pick up cheap. I appreciate you stopping by. I won't be needing the folder. Dale's smile thinned around the edges the way smiles do when they were never really about warmth to begin with. You might feel different in another month, when that debt schedule tightens up and the bank starts asking questions. We'll cross that if it comes, Claire said. It won't. He left with his folder and his golf shirt and the particular kind of irritation men like Dale carry when a woman doesn't behave the way they'd budgeted for in their head. I watched his truck pull out of the lot, polished enough that it had probably never hauled anything heavier than a set of golf clubs, and felt something in my chest ease a little, watching Claire stand in a doorway she'd built for herself and not budge an inch. You didn't need me to say anything just then, I told her, once his truck was gone. No, she said. But I noticed you tried anyway. That's different from doing it for me instead of me. I thought about that sentence for longer than I probably should have, turning it over on the drive home, because it was the first time in a year somebody had drawn that particular line for me so clearly, and it was a line worth remembering. Dale came back once more, a month later, this time with a number 12% higher and a lawyer standing next to him like a prop. Claire didn't even let him finish the sentence. She just said the company wasn't for sale and she'd rather he not waste gas money coming back a third time, and shut the door before his lawyer got a single word in. Renee, who'd stopped by to pick up paperwork and witnessed the whole thing from the parking lot, laughed so hard she had to lean against her car. Marcus would have hated watching that, she said. He hated confrontation. He always let you be the one to stare Dale Pruitt down at the feed counter. She didn't need me to stare anybody down, I said. She just needed the door to shut on time. Renee looked at me for a long second, something softening behind her eyes. You know, she said, for a while there I thought you were just filling a hole Marcus left behind. I don't think that anymore. I think you're just finally letting yourself be seen doing what you'd have done for her whether he'd been here or not. That became the shape of the next few months. Not romance, not yet, repair. I showed up to every meeting. I brought her every invoice, every number, everything Marcus and I had ever quietly moved around between us, all of it laid out on the table between coffee cups until there was nothing left to find by accident. We rebuilt the books together on Tuesday evenings, the same night of the week his truck had gone off Route 9, which felt less like a coincidence the longer we kept doing it and more like two people deciding, without saying so out loud, to take a bad night back and give it a better use. She got good at the numbers fast. Faster than I expected, though I probably should have expected it, since she'd spent 15 years married to a man who did everything by charm and gut feeling, which meant somebody in that house had to be the one keeping score. Turned out it had always been her. You knew all along, didn't you? I said one night, watching her reconcile a column of figures without needing the calculator twice. How the business actually ran. I balanced our checkbook every month for 15 years, she said. Marcus thought a spreadsheet was a personal attack. Somebody had to know where the money went. He never told me that. He wouldn't have. He liked people thinking he ran on instinct alone. She smiled, small and sad. It made a better story. By the fourth month, the debt was half paid, the company was breathing again, and something else had grown up quietly in the space between us the same way grass grows up through a cracked sidewalk. Not asked for, not planted, just persistent. I noticed it first in small things. The way she started bringing 2 coffees to our Tuesday meetings without asking how I took mine, because she'd learned it without either of us mentioning it out loud. The way I started looking forward to Tuesdays in a way that had stopped being only about the numbers a while back. The way neither of us mentioned it because mentioning it felt like it might scare it off, the way naming a bird will make it fly. Then Renee said something that changed the shape of the silence. She caught me alone one afternoon at the store, restocking screws nobody actually needed restocked, which is a very specific kind of task men invent for themselves when they need something to do with their hands while they think. "You're in love with her," Renee said. Not a question. I didn't answer right away, which was its own kind of answer. "I'm not trying to start anything," she said. "I watched my brother love that woman for 15 years. I know what it looks like on somebody's face. And I've been watching it grow on yours for about 3 months now." "It's too soon," I said. "For her. Maybe for me too." "Maybe," Renee said. "Or maybe you two have actually been honest with each other for the first time in either of your lives, and that tends to speed things up whether it's supposed to or not." She picked up a box of screws she didn't need either. "Just don't let it become another secret, Ethan. She's had enough of those to last a lifetime." That conversation sat in my chest for a week before Claire finally asked me the question I'd been putting off since the night on my porch. We were closing up the office on a Tuesday, the debt schedule almost finished, the last box of old invoices finally shredded, when she looked at me across the desk and said, "You still owe me the rest of that sentence." "Which sentence?" "The one you stopped yourself from finishing. On my couch." I wanted, and then nothing. I set down the folder in my hands. There wasn't a version of this where staying quiet was still the safer choice. Not anymore, not after everything we'd rebuilt on the promise of not hiding things from each other. "I wanted you to be able to look at me and see more than a debt," I said. "I wanted that a long time before this year, Claire, if I'm being honest, which I promised you I'd start being. I loved Marcus like a brother. That never changed and it never will. But somewhere in 15 years of watching the two of you, I started loving something about the way you ran a house and raised kids and kept a family standing even when your husband was out charming the whole county. I never let myself look at it straight on, because looking at it straight on felt like a betrayal of the best friendship I ever had. So I looked away. For years. And then he died, and looking away stopped feeling like loyalty and started feeling like cowardice, so I kept doing it anyway, because at least cowardice was familiar. The office was very quiet. Somewhere outside, a truck downshifted on the highway. "That's why you stayed away this last year," she said slowly. "Not just grief." "Both," I said. "Grief and guilt over feeling something I had no right feeling yet, tangled up so tight I couldn't tell you which one was which most days." She was quiet a long moment, turning her coffee mug slowly in her hands the way she did when she was deciding how honest to be. "I noticed you staying away," she said finally. "I told myself it was respect. Some of it was. But some nights I sat in that house alone after the kids went to bed and wondered why the one person who understood exactly what I'd lost had disappeared right when I needed somebody who understood it." "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry yet," she said. "Let me finish, since you finally let yourself finish." She set the mug down. "I loved my husband, Ethan. That's not going to change either, and I need you to understand that whatever this is, it doesn't erase 15 years, it just comes after them. But somewhere around the third Tuesday you sat across this desk and told me the truth about something instead of managing me around it, I started looking forward to Tuesdays for reasons that had stopped being only about the company." I looked at her. A year of careful distance, of Tuesday meetings and honest ledgers and unfinished sentences, all of it collapsed down into the space between two people finally willing to say the true thing out loud. "I'm not asking you for anything you're not ready to give," I said. "I've waited this long. I can wait until it's clean." "It's clean enough," she said, and there was something steady in her voice that reminded me, gently, painfully, of the man we'd both loved and lost. Marcus spent his whole life catching people before they went down. Maybe it's not so strange that the last thing he caught, without meaning to, was the two of us. I didn't kiss her that night. It felt too soon for that, even with everything said. But I walked her to her car, and when she reached out and took my hand before opening the door, I let her, and neither of us let go for longer than the moment strictly required. The final piece came 6 weeks later, when the debt schedule finished early and Renee, of all people, was the one who suggested a small dinner to mark the company's first clean set of books in 3 years. Claire's kids came too, a boy and a girl who'd grown up calling me Uncle Ethan without either of us ever having decided that was allowed, just something that had happened the way Rayall family happens, without a vote. Her daughter, 7 years old and sharper than most adults I know, looked up at me over dessert and asked, plain as anything, "Are you gonna marry my mom?" The table went still. Claire went red. Renee, unhelpfully, grinned into her wineglass. "I'm working on it," I said, which was true, and which was also the first time I'd said it out loud to anyone, including myself. Claire looked at me across the table, and for the first time since that Tuesday night on my porch, her eyes didn't have that hollowed-out steadiness grief leaves behind. They had something else in them. Something that looked a lot like a woman who'd spent a year learning how to trust the truth again, and had decided, carefully, deliberately, that the truth this time was worth building something on. A year after that, almost to the week, I asked her properly, in the conference room above the hardware store, next to the shelf where Marcus's jar of butterscotch candies still sat, because some things you don't throw away, you just let become part of the room. I told her I didn't want to replace anything, only to add to it. She said yes before I even finished the sentence, and I didn't mind one bit that she'd interrupted, because for once in my life, the thing I'd been too afraid to say out loud had finally been heard before I even had to say it all. People in town still ask how we ended up together, and Claire tells it different ways depending on her mood. Sometimes she says a $40,000 secret brought us together. Sometimes she says Marcus did, without meaning to, the same way he'd been catching people his whole life. I think both of those are true, and I think the real answer is simpler than either one, that the only way two people who'd both loved the same good man could ever build something honest together was by refusing, finally, to keep any more secrets from each other, even the ones that felt kinder left buried. So here's what I keep coming back to. If your best friend left you holding something you were too scared to hand over, a debt, a truth, a feeling you buried out of loyalty to somebody who isn't around to release you from it anymore, would you have told her the night she showed up at your door? Or would you have waited, the way I did, until the waiting itself became its own kind of lie? And if you've ever loved someone you had no right loving yet, someone tangled up in grief and guilt and timing that never once felt fair, how long did you wait before you finally told the truth? Tell me your story in the comments. If this one got you, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.